sure you call into the show. Larry and Dylan want to hear from you. Call in by clicking the link in the video's description. See you there.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, WSN presents The Lowdown. The Lowdown
Podcast.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of The Lowdown. Here with my co-host, Dylan Down.
How we doing tonight, guys?
And our special guest, the most educated man in professional wrestling, Dr. Jerry Graham Jr.
Thank
Glad
you.
to
Nice
have
to be
you,
here.
Glad to have you, man.
All right. So, if you're ready to go, I'm ready to get at it. You ready?
I'm here.
All right. So, my first question for you, Doctor, is you used to be big, man.
I'm still big. Wrestling has gotten small.
All right. All right. So, want to start with like in the beginning, like what year did you get into professional wrestling and how did you get into it?
Well, I started in the business right around 1970. And how I got into business is a pretty well-known story by now, but just to let you know, I'd always wanted to be a wrestler like many professional wrestlers, but when I grew up, went in the Army, I figured, well, now the time for childhood stuff is over. I met my wife in the Army. I came back with a wife and eventually a family. So the chances of training to be a pro wrestler was pretty chances are pretty low. But my family had a wholesale meat company in Toledo, Ohio, and my job, I started with the company, was delivery truck. And the service station that serviced our delivery trucks was run by Martino Angelo, who was a wrestling promoter in Toledo. So I don't know what the chances of that would be, but I got to know him. He took a liking to me, started taking me to the gym, trained me, and when he thought I was ready to start working, he took me to the Sheik, who was running the Ohio, Michigan territory at that time. And they started me out as a timekeeper, ring announcer, then referee, and then finally I started wrestling. And I kept that up until right around 2000. So that'd be 30 years. Then I had a comeback match around 208, 209, one match. And then I worked for promotion for a while as a manager. But so I have over 40 years in the business.
Wow. Yeah. So what I know you best from is the WWA in Indianapolis. So
Well, that's where I
growing
got
up,
my- Go
yeah.
ahead.
So growing up as a kid, I got to see you, Wojo, Bruiser, Calypso Jim. That's what I got to grow up watching.
Well, I got in there before they did in the 70s. A man named Les Ruffin, who was a wrestling promoter from Cincinnati, who used to watch me work and liked me, talked to Dick the Bruiser, and he got me in. They brought me in originally as a tag team partner for Paul Christie. At that time, a guy named Roger Kirby, another great wrestler, was leaving for
Yep.
Puerto Rico, and Christie needed a tag team partner. So I got my chance, and it worked. Christy and me drew a lot of money, and I was with Bruiser. That was my, I guess, my home territory for my entire career, although I did go all around a lot of places. But I called Indianapolis home. A lot of people think I called Detroit home, but no, it's Indianapolis.
All right. So, what were some of the wrestlers you got to wrestle with there in the WWA? Some guys you got
Well,
to work.
Well, I'm going to expand it from the WWA because I was still working in Detroit, but I guess I consider WWA home. I worked in Detroit and a lot of other places. I got to wrestle most of the big stars of that time, from Dick the Bruiser, the Sheik, Wild Bull Curry, Flying Fred Curry, Randy Savage, Lanny Poffo, his brother, Angelo Poffo, their father. I wrestled him. I wrestled Terry Funk, Dory Funk Jr., um,
Mm.
Bobo Brazil, Yukon Moose Sholak. It was just wasn't too many guys. Don Fargo, Chris Colt. Um, I would say 90% of the top stars at that time to me. Don Morocco, uh, King Ripper Collins, uh, a guy who you know as Haku, but when I was in Hawaii, he called himself Toma Tonga, and he was just starting out, and I wrestled him. Uh, so pretty much most of the top stars of the 70s and 80s, sooner or later, I got a chance to wrestle with them. Not all, but I'd say 80, 90% of them.
Yeah, that's quite a few there. That's awesome. Yeah, I didn't even know all that.
Well, I've been there and back, been there, done that, like I say. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, I got to see you at the Tyndall Armory for one. Got to see
yeah,
you wrestle there. And at the fairgrounds too.
yeah.
At the yeah.
When I started with Bruiser, we were wrestling at the exhibition side of whatever the big arena was called, Indianapolis. We used to wrestle there. The place would be,
Expo Center.
yeah, the place would be packed. It'd be
Yeah,
absolutely packed. Yeah.
absolutely.
I'm thinking of more guys I wrestled: Ivan Koloff, Adrian Adonis, Mr. Fuji. It's a pretty long list.
Now, out of that list, Doctor Jerry Graham, there, what would have been your favorite match? Do you have a favorite match that you had throughout your career?
Well, that's kind of hard to say. There's been so many of them. One match that comes in mind was a match we had in Detroit where we was Don Kent, Bulldog Don Kent, and against Calypso Jim and Chris Carter, where we tore the whole building apart. The concession stands, ticket stands, everything got wrecked. There was two disc jockeys at ringside that were guest commentators. We beat them up. It was wild. Another match that people still talk about was in Toledo when we had the barbed wire match. We wrapped most barbed wire matches. What they would do is they'd wrap the barbed wire outside of the ring posts, so you couldn't get out of the ring. But we wrapped our barbed wire around the ropes, and it was a bloodbath. And it's on YouTube if you care to see it. It's pretty.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a pretty gruesome match. Yeah, it's because later on, like I said, I was with Indianapolis, but I got television for Bruiser in Michigan and Ohio, so I was Bruiser's partner, not in Indiana and Illinois. That was his territory already, but he helped me out, so we came in as 50-50 partners uh, in Ohio and Michigan and Ontario, Canada. So
That would have been the Bruiser Bellum wrestling.
Bruiser Bedlam. Yeah, well, I was partners with Bruiser in Ohio, Michigan before that, and we were getting by. But then we got approached by a company in Detroit that had this idea for a show where Bruiser was the host, and he was going to present the wrestlers. And Bruiser bought it, and it took off like wildfire. And that's when I trained. I personally trained and got Scott Steiner started. He started with us in the Bruiser Bedlam promotion, and we also had Tommy Rich come in. We had the Iron Sheik come in. Uh, uh, they- Getting back to the guys I wrestled, Don Kent and Al Costello, the Fabulous Kangaroos, Dusty Rhodes. I'm just thinking, uh, it's there's just so many as we're talking. I'm starting to remember stuff. But it was the Bruiser Bedlam did very well. We were in business for a couple, 3 years. And then at that time, we were competing with the WWF. Now the WWE was around, but they were only coming to our towns a few times a year. So we were able to stay in business even though WWF was there. But then when WCW started going around, then pretty soon each of them would go to 3 times a year to our town. So we had six shows a year. So Bruiser and I decided rather than spend the money we made, we closed down. And that's something that I stress on every podcast talk show that I'm on, is that Bruiser Bedlam did not go broke. We were a profitable company. We had money in the bank, but we were looking at the future. And we said it was grim because it was the two big promotions was just too much. So we decided to close it down. We had a bank account. We split the money up, and we just went on to other things. But I see so many times on the internet people talk about how Bruiser Bedlam went broke. Absolutely not true. And most of the independents did go broke, but we were fortunate enough to know when to hold them and know when to fold them. So we did not go broke. We paid all of our bills, and we quit with money in the bank. So it was a success.
Yeah, sounds like a wise business decision to me.
Well, sometimes you got to know when to quit. I was in the wholesale meat business too, and we were selling meat to restaurants. And what was happening in all over the country was these big chains were coming in: McDonald's, Wendy's, Burger King, Outback, Lone Star. You know all the chains, and they would not buy from local meat guys, and they were putting the local guys out of business. So we saw that coming. So I found a guy who wanted to buy the meat company. So in 2011, I sold the meat company. We were the biggest meat company in Toledo for years, but we could see it was Aldous Huxley, the famous author, that said inevitable consequences are beacons for wise men and scarecrows for fools. So we knew when to sell the meat business as well. Sometimes selling is the correct move in a business deal. A lot of guys don't realize that. But Bruiser and I were both businessmen besides wrestling promoters and besides wrestlers, and we knew when to do what, and we were very fortunate. Not well, I won't even say fortunate implies luck. But like there's an old saying, the harder I worked, the luckier I got. You know.
So, would you mind telling us a little bit about your stint in the WWF at the time?
Well, if you got 10 seconds, well, what happened was this. I was working with George Cannon in Detroit. This is before I got with Bruiser Bedlam. And he had gone partners in Michigan and Canada with Vince McMahon. And they needed a manager. So he called, George Cannon called McMahon and said, "This is Jerry Graham's pretty good." And he said, "Well, send a demo tape." So we did a demo tape, which I thought was excellent, and it got me hired. And so I got a few matches. I got to go to Kuwait, in the Middle East with them. So, but then I came back, they had me manage in St. Louis at the Chase Hotel, which was a big wrestling venue. And I wrestled Adrian Adonis and Dick Murdoch, and I wrestled Big John. I managed Big John Studd, and after one session there, I was fired. So that was that. There was all kinds of different theories and stories why they fired me, but I'm just going to say they weren't interested in me. I'm not going to be one of these whiners that's, if you ever read a book written by a wrestler as one of two themes. One is I was great and everyone should know about it. Or I could have been great, but those no good son of a guns blocked me. They got excuses. Mine was they didn't want me. But the book I wrote was not about whether I was great or lousy. I wrote a book called Confessions of a Big Time Wrestler, And what it was an audio book, really. It's me telling the stories, but of all the guys I met and stories about them. So I thought the people that got it liked it, and they said it was a good story, and they liked hearing it. And I also put a 90-minute video in it they could watch too. It was a pretty good deal for $20, um, I uh, got some guys on the internet. One particularly says, "Yeah, sure. Watch Graham. He wrote a book about himself. Watch him put himself over, and make himself a star." Obviously, the guy didn't read the book because the book wasn't about me, other than the fact it was about the big stars that I had met and stories about them. There was nothing there that, I never was big on self promotion. If people want to see my matches, buy the videos, whatever is still out there, that's fine, and I hope they enjoy them. I'm not going to sit here and talk about how great I am, because I see that all over the internet, as do you. And it's either they could have really made it big, but this lousy promoter got in their way, didn't recognize what geniuses they were. Well, I refuse to do that. And I refuse to say, that I was able to wrestle at the Chicago Amphitheater and semi-main events with Wilbur Snyder and Moose Sholak and stuff like that. There was stuff that I did that I thought was, well, I didn't go as far as a lot of guys. I trained with Randy Savage. We trained together. And I think he went a little farther than I did. But what we used to do, the Sheik liked us so much. A lot of people don't realize this. When you're running a wrestling show, the second most important match is your opening match. The most important match is the main event. That's what sells the tickets. But you want to get the people off on the right foot with a good first match. And the Sheik booked me and Randy Savage against each other all over the territory forever. So and Randy and me were friends. We worked together, and we make sure the matches were the way they ought to be. And it was. And he was an excellent hand. Very good. Really, really, really had a heart in the business. Like a lot of guys didn't. A lot of guys are self-absorbed. He was always for the business, always for getting the show over. That's what a real worker does. You want to get the show over, not yourself. It's good to get yourself over too, but the idea is you want people leaving the show feeling that they got their money's worth.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
absolutely, absolutely. One of the things that while you were talking there about you may not have made it. They didn't want you and stuff. Even with that being said, you're a legend. I mean, I'm 23, and my dad used to tell me stories about you and the guys up there in WWA, and to someone like me, it's like you don't have to be in that spotlight all the time to be a legend in the business. I mean, your matches and stuff are some like you getting your hair shaved at Tyndall Armory and stuff like that. That those moments will just live on forever.
Well, I'll tell you, that's why I say it's my home territory. That's where they really turned me loose. That's where they let me do what I could do, and we drew money there. And apparently your dad liked what he saw. A lot of times
He
I'd go
did.
places and they would restrict what we could do, what we couldn't do. And well, at the end there, I was booking territory, doing the finishes for Bruiser, especially in Ohio and Michigan, but as well as in Indiana and Illinois, because we had stuff that made sense. But when I went to work for, I'll give you an example. This is not crying. This is just what happened to me. I went to St. Louis, and I was going to manage first show Big John Studd, and they didn't tell me anything. And they bought me a tuxedo. They bought me three tuxedos. So I had one of the tuxedos on, and just before we go out to the ring, they tell me, Pat Patterson whispers in my ear, "Your new name is Megan Manigoff, and Gene Okerlund is going to interview you. It's going to be a 60-second interview that includes the question and the answer. And we want to see how good you are on your feet." So then we go. I got a new name, Megan Manigoff. Now, I can say it real easy now, but have somebody put that in your ear just as you're walking to the ring for the first time. So anyway, I got to the ring, and Big John said, oh, and they also told me, don't do anything. Just stand there. Don't grab anybody's foot under the rope. don't get involved with anything. Just let John Studd do his thing. So they were the bosses. Later, I was told, boy, you were just drab. You didn't do anything by some of the other wrestlers and people that watched the show. And it was very frustrating because they told me not to do anything. I was doing what they told me. But here was the kicker. When the match was over, the interview, which I didn't have, they gave me no clue. You know, really, I didn't like that because you always want the best show possible when you're running a show. And it doesn't hurt to tell the guys what you're going to ask them because it makes for better, cleverer answers. You know, it just makes the show better. But anyway, they come up to me and they say, Gene Okerlund says, why does John Studd need you for a manager? He's a big, tough guy. He can handle himself. Why does he need Megan Manigoff in his corner as a manager? Now, keep in mind, I didn't know they were going to ask me that question. I had to think completely on my feet. So the answer I gave, I didn't think was half bad. I said, I'll tell you why, because Big John Studd's too nice of a guy. I'm not going to let any crooked referees take advantage of him. I'm not going to let any crooked commissioners, any crooked promoters. He's going to get a square deal. And the only thing he's going to have to worry about is his opponent. I'm his manager. I'll worry about everything else. Not bad for having no preparation. I get back in the dressing room and John Studd just tears me apart. What are you talking about yourself for? You're supposed to be building me up. You're supposed to say, I'm the biggest guy in wrestling. I can't be slammed. I can't be this. I can't be that. I mean, did you hear the question they asked me? I mean, they gave me no preparation at all, and I thought I did all right, but apparently I did not do all right because uh, one of the reasons that they say I got was a Stud got me fired. Stud used to tell people that he was basically a nice guy. I knew him when he was Chuck O'Connor. He used to wrestle for Bruiser, and I always got along with him. He was always a nice guy. Maybe he was under a lot of pressure to perform where he was at because he absolutely tore me to shreds. And I didn't think I deserved it. If I had started, fumbling my words or stuttering or stammering or, getting stage fright and screwing up, I could see, but I did the best I could do. And I didn't think it was that bad considering the question they asked me. So we had another show because we did 4 shows that night. The next show I was with him, I didn't even pay attention to what they asked me. I just said, John Studd is the biggest man in wrestling. Nobody can slam him. Andre the Giant's terrified of him. They could have asked me what color socks I had on. I didn't care. I just give him what Studd wanted to hear. And I did get along well with Murdoch and Adonis. As a manager, they treated me right. But after that show, kind of funny. I've told the story a million times, but it's kind of funny. The next day after St. Louis, I was back in Toledo at the Tyler Meat Company. That was our company, and I was out calling on customers as a salesman. I've been promoted by this time from truck driver to salesman, and I came back to the office, and the secretary said, "I got a message for you from the WWF." They said, "Don't come back."
No.
Now, I'm thinking, they had their secretary had my secretary fire me, and that's just a real lack of class. I've been a businessman all my life, wrestling promoter and the meat business. And unless I caught somebody stealing, that's a different story because, meat, the guys want to steal. But if a guy just couldn't do the job, or he's trying real hard, whether it be a wrestler or whether it be in the meat business, I'd feel terrible about firing a guy. And I'd take him aside and I'd talk to him myself. Now, as far as the WWF goes, I was friends with another guy I used to wrestle, 2 other guys, Chief Jay Strongbow, George the Animal Steel. Okay. And I was friends with Gorilla Monsoon. Now, if Vince didn't have time to talk to me because he was too important, he had 3 lieutenants that could have given me the word. I mean, if he didn't want me, he didn't want me. I'm not complaining. I want to make this very clear. I'm not complaining too much that I was fired, or nobody likes to get fired. I was complaining the way it happened. My secretary, you're going to fire a guy, you take him aside and you say, this is not working out. Maybe later on down the road we can do something. Let the guy have some dignity, even if they're not planning to use me later on down the road.
Right.
That man was, a very successful promoter. Although I guess the guys that have bought him out are even doing better than he did, from what I hear. But but overall, he was a great promoter. He was just a lousy human being. That's all.
You heard it here. You got the lowdown.
Well, I'm not, like I said, you get fired, you get fired. In fact, one of my friends, George Cannon, fired me. Then he hired me back. He got mad at me about something, and then he hired me back. Getting fired is part of being in business. It's the way I was treated. There's a difference. I'm not mad because I got fired. I'm not happy about it, but it happens. But the way that my secretary tells me, that their secretary told her to tell me not to come back, like I say, that's real low class stuff. And I was always a high class person, so I guess you know, uh, how they say a blind man can sense, smell, and taste and touch better because well, I guess because I get such high class, I'm more sensitive to low class people like Vince McMahon. It bothers me more than it bothers a lot of people. But I'm happy with my wrestling career. I'm happy with my life. I have a wonderful wife, wonderful kids, 14 grandkids and great
Wow.
grandkids, and
Yeah.
and I'm comfortable. So I'm happy with my life. A lot of my friends didn't live as long as I did. A lot of my friends we just had tough lives. I've had some tough times in my life as well, but overall, I'm very happy with the way things went. So
As
one happy
as
camper.
you should be.
Glad to hear.
As you So I guess for me, I got a cup. I want to go back to the WWA just a little bit because
Anything
that's
you
what
want.
I know most about. I was just going to ask you, did you ever get to wrestle Bruiser Brody there? I know I
No, but
watched him.
he was a friend of mine.
Go.
He was a friend of mine. I never got to wrestle him. No, but I knew him quite well. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that was the first match I ever seen was Dick the Bruiser and Bruiser Brody at Market Square Arena.
yeah. I wrestled Market Square Arena too. Yeah, that was. Um, they had some of the best talent. I mean, they had Andre the Giant come in. They had Bruno Sammartino, Ivan Koloff. They had some of the
Oh yeah,
best talent in the business. Indianapolis used to be one of the best places to have be a wrestling fan in the country. That in St.
yes sir.
Louis, that in St. Louis
Yeah.
too, because they always had the best names. Always had the best names coming through. Yeah.
And I guess someone else from the WWA, like no one really knows about him that much, but I thought he was the best wrestling announcer was David McLean.
Well, you see, I'll tell you about anything like that. Whether it's who's the best wrestler, who's the best announcer, who's best. David McLean was an excellent commentator, but there was a lot of other, just like he was the greatest wrestler. McLean did a good job, and he's a friend of mine, and I think that he was right on top of things for us. When Sam Menaker left, he filled in, and he did an excellent job. Mhm.
Yeah, he had a great voice, I thought, for it. It really just worked real well.
Well, yes, he did. Yes, he did. Uh,
I guess someone else I'd like to ask you about from that time period that I grew up watching too, as well as Bobo Brazil Jr. or Calypso Jim is how I knew him back then.
well, he was a really top-notch wrestler in the ring. He knew what he was doing, and I'm going to tell you, I don't know if you ever worked or not, but in wrestling, it's a very exact science. It takes a long time to learn how to do it correctly. And Angelo Poffo, that's Randy Savage and Lanny Poffo's father, told me you got to be at the point where every move you make, you know why you're doing it, because something else is coming. You got to know everything. If you grab the guy's wrist, you got to know why did I grab his wrist, and I found that to be true. It took a long time to learn, but the point I'm getting at, the first time I wrestled Calypso Jim was in Hammond, Indiana, and he was a substitute. I was scheduled to wrestle somebody else, and my opponent didn't show up, and I thought he was excellent. And I mean, I didn't know him. And I went to Bruiser. I said, "This guy you got to start using because he is really, really good." And he he always appreciated the fact that I did that to get him started. But his career is based on not me. His career is based on his talent, and he did have a lot of talent. I never could figure out why one of the bigger promotions never picked him up, because he had it all. He had the looks, the body, and most important, the ability to give you a really top-notch match. But
Yeah, always.
uh, he's still wrestling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. We know. We've caught him. So we live here in Seymour, Indiana.
Hmm.
We've actually seen him here in Seymour, Indiana at a show.
Oh, that's,
Yeah.
he he was really good. But I just we had when we started with Boozer Bedlam. One of the first things we did was he had all those Jamaican dreadlocks on. We Wojo, me and Don Kent held him down and cut his hair off, and place went crazy, and then we started drawing money all over the place. And then as that thing was winding down, we started with Scott Steiner, and that was really winding up. And we were going all over, maybe 20 times a month, which isn't bad for an independent promotion like that. And between Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, and sometimes Illinois, and we had it. I mean, we just had some good matches, and there's a lot of them on TV right now. Dave Dynasty got a lot of our matches that he's putting out now. If you're interested in it at all, and
Yeah, very interested in it. I talk to Dave every now and again, trying to get stuff. Absolutely.
he's the go-to guy. Also, there's another guy named Bob Smith out of New York. He's a really good podcaster, as are you. I'm just saying, there's guys out there. You guys should probably get together and compare notes and stuff. I don't know. I've never done a podcast. I mean, I've been on podcasts as a guest, but there's guys out there. I think it's always better if you can work together with guys. But that's just a thought I had. You know, it's not.
You,
It's not a direct order.
the way you are, you should have a podcast, though. You'd be fantastic at it.
I don't have the patience. Right now, I'm too old to do anything. I had a well, there was well, I didn't have it. There was a promotion here in Toledo that asked me to come in and do the dressing room for them and do their angles and stuff. And it got to be that was a once a month job. I was dreading going there because I have to work, and I had to work with a bunch of inexperienced kids that knew everything, which was a nightmare. You know, when I was young, starting out in my 20s, if I had a match and then one of the old timers took me aside and said, "Hey, maybe if you could do it this way or do it that way," I was so appreciative that they would take the time to show me something. I just couldn't tell you how happy I was. So I thought that, you know, it's still like that. So I had these young kids in this promotion, and I'd take one aside and said, "Don't tell me how to work." And, gee, okay, I'm sorry, I don't know nothing.
Man.
Uh, I had these two kids. I'm not going to mention their names because I don't want to embarrass anybody, but they were both excellent. I mean, excellent as far as executing moves, but they had no ring psychology. And the first few times I tried to help them, they were polite to me, but they didn't listen. You know what I mean? So finally, one day they had this big build up for a big gimmick match in Toledo, and these guys busted their butts. They did some fantastic moves, and the crowd was sitting still. And after the match was over, they came to me and said, "All right, we were wrong, you were right. Will you help us?" Well, unfortunately, at that time, I was having problems with the owners. I had quit. But these two guys could have been something if they listened to me or listened to somebody else. You know, there's other good coaches out there. But wrestling is. Can you hear me? I'm
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. I got you.
okay. I'm gonna take my glasses off. Sometimes my glasses get in the way of my. I wear hearing aids, and sometimes the glasses get in the way. Um, um, what was I going to say? We're talking about teaching guys how to work. Uh, well, I lost my train of thought when I got beeped. So I think my hearing aid hearing went out for a minute. But, and at my age, you get senile. So,
But touching on that a little bit there, Dr. Jerry Graham, my final question for you, for guys that are getting into the business today, do you have that one solid piece of advice that you give each person that you've trained over the years?
well, I'll tell you, I'm glad you asked me that because I remember what I was going to say. So you just, seriously, I did. Uh, you got to learn your basics. It's like anything else. Your fundamentals. It's arts and craft. You got to learn your craft first. How to do the holds, how to apply the holds, how to do the moves, the drop kicks, the body slams, the flying head scissors. Learn. Then you got to learn the art, when to do what, and that's the hard part. I could take any guy or girl for that matter with athletic ability, although I never trained any girls, but I could same thing. I could show them how to do the moves, but they got to figure out, and that comes with experience and guys teaching you, telling you things, and I'll tell you exactly how I learned this business. I got a lot of guys helped me along the way. The first guy to teach me, I call this my my bachelor's degree, was Martino Angelo. He was an old time wrestler. He got me started. He was the one who was managing the service station, and he taught me about wrestling. Then my master's degree, I was taught by Bulldog Don Kent, who ended up being my tag team partner, the best one I had based on how much money we made and where we went and how popular we were. And then my PhD training was in Hawaii when King Curtis Ayakea and Lord James Blears, I just sat on the beach with them every day because you only wrestled 2 days a week in Hawaii when I was there. So you had a lot of time. And they would tell me things to do that was amazing to me. And they were affiliated with Mark Lewin, who was another great wrestler. There was guys that were just head and shoulders above other guys. And I'm not saying I was part of that crew, but I was saying I was trained by that crew. And Mark Lewin helped me out a little bit in Detroit as well, but not as much as King Curtis and Lord Blears. And when I came back from Hawaii, that's when Bruiser started letting me do things because these guys had taught me stuff. And that's what you've got to do to answer your question is once you learn your basics, once you learn how to do the holds, you got to have somebody teach you how to, when you're wrestling a match, some guys say telling a story. That's what I do because other guys say painting a picture. You've got to have the people make it quick. A guy is out wrestling another guy. He's using good, clean, scientific holds. He's winning. So the other guy starts breaking the rules. That starts annoying the crowd because he was getting beaten. So instead of going out and starting hitting and slugging and punching, you tell them a story. Once you get the angles going, then you start with the meat chopping and stuff. But I'm giving you an idea what I'm talking about. So then the rough guy starts using dirty tactics. He takes over, and that'll annoy the people. And the baby's got to start selling, and the heel starts getting his heat. Then when things are ready to go, the big comeback. You got to time it just right. And when a comeback comes, if you do it correctly, the crowd goes crazy. Then you can do one of two things. You can have the baby face finish the comeback and win the match, or you can have the heel do something really rotten and pin the baby face at the end of the comeback, and you'll get people upset with you. Now, that was a very basic, simple version. There's got to be a lot more put into that than what I just said, but you get what I'm trying to talk about. You're telling a story. You're not just so many guys. You do this, I'll do that. You do this, I'll do that. They take turns doing moves on each other. I don't know why the crowd isn't doing anything. Where if you let things build up and learn how to do it, it's just I can't just teach the whole class on the on your show or on anybody else's show for that matter. But what I can do is tell them to get hooked up with somebody that's been in the business for a long time and learn. After you learn how you do the holds, learn when to do the holds, and then see if you got the talent or not. Some people aren't going to make it; they just can't get it. Just like some people can't draw pictures, some people can't do carpentry work. Some people can do things and some people can't. And wrestling's the same way. If I'd be happy to help anybody. They have a wrestling school here in Toledo. I stopped by, they invited me over one time, and I'm thinking, boy, these guys could use some help. But I saw um, another wrestling school they had. There was a tag team that was working out in the ring. So the teacher had invited me over. So I got up in the ring with these guys, and here's a spot you can do. And I got yelled at by the teacher. You don't show my guys anything. Well, when I was teaching guys, I used to take Wojo up to Detroit so Al Costello could work with him. Fabulous Kangaroo. I wasn't jealous about that. And I saw these two boys trying something, and I wanted to help them. I didn't
Right.
charge them anything, but that's the point I'm getting at, is you want an older guy to help you. And, I trained a guy once over the internet.
Did you?
Really?
Well, he already was wrestling. I'm talking about the psychology. He weighed about 350 pounds, and he was in New Zealand. I have a son that used to live in New Zealand, and he wasn't a wrestler, but he got to know this guy. So I talked to the guy online, and I'd say something like, "You're a big guy. Can you drop kick?" He said, "I think so." Well, just one time, because you're a big man. You're not Rocky Johnson or Flying Fred Curry. One time in a match, I want you to throw a drop kick. And so the next day he calls me and says, the place went crazy. They went crazy. I threw a drop kick and they couldn't believe how a big guy got up like that. So I started giving him one hold at a time, telling him when to do it and how to do it. And he became a pretty good worker. And right now I can't even remember his name. But he was a big 350-pound guy, and I had him throwing drop kicks and doing drop down arm drags and stuff. See, like Crusher Blackwell was one of the best big men of all time. He could go over the top rope. He was almost 400 pounds. Go over the top rope backwards, throw drop kicks, get back dropped. He could really move around that ring. I really admired him, Crusher Blackwell from Stone Mountain, Georgia. He was one of the best. But you'd mentioned you'd wanted to close it up. If there's nothing else I can do for you.
Well, I do got one more though I want to ask you about from the
Sure.
WWF. That it was also one. So you, Bruiser, Wojo, Calypso Jim, and the last one was Spike Huber. You
Yeah.
guys were my favorites. You got anything you can speak on about Spike Huber?
Spike Huber is another one I couldn't figure out why the big promotions didn't pick him up. He was sensational. I used to love to work with him for two things. He could do the moves, he had the psychology, and he was there to get the match over, not himself over. And that's what I was there for, to get the match over. When two guys are working to get the match over. Oh, by the way, the first person to teach me that was the original Bobo Brazil. I was working with him in Cleveland. He said, "No, we got to get the match over, not ourselves over." And I did what he told me, and the place went crazy. And we got the match over. But all the guys you mentioned I enjoyed working with all of them. And Dick the Bruiser was a tremendous gentleman. I was very upset when he died. He was really the guy that other guys helped me along the way, but he's the guy who put me in the main events in a major territory. By the way, I used to wrestle Al Snow, Mickey
Yeah.
Doyle. There's just so many of them I can't remember. Abdullah the Butcher. There's another one I forgot to tell you about. Yeah.
Man, I bet those were some bloodbaths.
Well, they could have been worse, but they were. He was a solid wrestler. There's no question about it. He was over. He drew money almost every place he went. Yeah. He was.
All right.
He was a top guy. He wrestled the Sheik in Detroit. It had fantastic matches. Yeah. And they'd be tag team partners and then turn on each other, come back and have a match against each other. It was really something.
All right. Well, Dr. Jerry Graham, it's been a real honor to have you on here with me.
The pleasure
One of
is
my
all yours.
childhood freaking heroes, man.
Okay,
It was
thanks for having
fantastic.
me on. I always like to talk about wrestling with people that like to talk about wrestling. So thank you very much for having me on. I'll be happy anytime you guys need any help, let me know. And
Will do.
And we'll
What
talk to you later. Okay.
before you go, what was the name of that audio book again, so people can get the name of it, including
Well,
me?
Confessions of a Big Time Wrestler. There's not too many left, but just I'll send. Just get me your address afterward. Just text it to me. Okay.
Oh wow! All right, thank you, sir.
Okay. We'll
All right,
talk to
you've
you
been a
later.
fantastic guest. Thank
Thank you
you.
much, Dr. Gary Graham.
We'll see both of you. Nice to talk to both of you. Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
Thank
much.
you so much.
Okay.
Wow,
Guys, it's been a pleasure. And we'll see you on
wow.
the next episode, man. That was fantastic.
For me, it was wow. All right, that's been another episode of the Lowdown. Everybody, see you next week.
Have a good night, everybody.
Ah.